My granddaughter rolled her eyes at my gift, so I removed her from the trust it was during dessert, if you can believe that. The others were still talking about the cruise they'd booked, and I was handing out little envelopes, one for each of the grandkids. It's just a small tradition I started after Harold passed. Something to feel useful around the holidays. I watched her open it. A check for $500, neatly folded. I'd written a note too, in cursive she never learned to read. She looked at it, rolled her eyes, and said in that half-laughing way of hers, "Well, that'll really help with my car insurance." No one said anything. Not her parents, not her brothers, not even my son. I just stood there for a moment. Napkin still on my lap, pie untouched. That's when I felt it. Not anger, not even embarrassment. Just a strange sort of click. Like something inside me had finally gone quiet. I'm Marjorie Ann Pierce. I'm 74. And that was the moment. I knew I didn't belong at that table anymore. Subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thanks. When I was younger, thought motherhood would be enough to make me feel rooted in the world. Gave everything to it. I don't say that for praise. It's just the truth. When my husband died of a heart attack in the pantry at 59, it was me and the 3 kids. I didn't remarry. I didn't travel. I didn't even repaint the kitchen. Poured my time into birthdays and casseroles and babysitting. I became a grandmother the way some women become ministers, by calling. By devotion. My oldest, Thomas, always said he appreciated me. He used to kiss the top of my head, but over the years he grew quiet with his gratitude. I suppose the world doesn't have much room for women who don't ask for anything. My daughter-in-law Karen, she took the reins early on. Very good at organizing things. Not so good at noticing who got left out. But I made it easy for her. I smiled when they took holidays without me. I stayed home when I wasn't invited. I made every interaction light, like it was all fine. I see that now, that I trained them how to treat me. There was a time I gave my granddaughter Emily my own locket, not because it was worth anything, but because it had a photo of me and her father when he was 5. I found it in a Goodwill box the following spring. Karen said, "Oh, that must have been a mistake." But it wasn't a mistake. It was a message. And still, I stayed. Until the night of the pie, I didn't say anything. I don't believe in dramatics. I tucked the other envelopes back in my purse and folded my napkin slowly. Drove home in the dark. And when I got to my front porch and turned the key, I looked down at the welcome mat and felt like I was trespassing in my own life. I didn't sleep much that night. Just stared at the ceiling, hand resting on my chest like I was trying to keep something in. I knew what I had to do. I'd had the papers for years. Harold made sure of that. Kate, living trust, power of attorney, all the pieces you tuck away in the fireproof box and forget about until someone dies. They never asked what was in them. They just assumed. But I remembered. The next morning I made copies. Sat at the little oak desk in the sunroom with a cup of cold coffee and started writing. Crossed out names, rewrote portions, removed anyone who'd forgotten I was still breathing. I called the lawyer quietly, arranged for an appointment, and changed everything. It felt like rearranging furniture in a burning house. I wasn't trying to save what was left, I was choosing what to carry forward. That night, I pulled the fireproof box out of the closet, placed the new papers inside, and then I packed. One bag, my Bible, my journals, a few photographs no one else would recognize. I left a note on the table that just said, "Taking a breath. Do not follow." I checked into a motel 2 towns over, nothing fancy. But the sheets were clean and no one called me grandma out of obligation. That first week, I did nothing but sit and listen to silence. Not the kind you get from being ignored, the real kind. The kind that makes you remember your own voice. Then the messages started. Voicemails. Missed calls. Thomas first. He said, "Hey, Mom, can we talk? There's been a misunderstanding." Karen texted me with a screenshot of a Reddit thread asking if anyone else had an ungrateful granddaughter problem. She wrote, "Is this about Christmas?" I didn't. Answer.Emily posted something vague on Instagram. Something about people being dramatic and money not buying love. I read it, took a breath, deleted my account. It was fascinating how quickly they scrambled once the money left the table. Not one of them asked if I was safe. They just wanted me back where they'd left me. But I didn't go back. I bought a small rental near the coast. It's just me and the birds. Started baking again, not for anyone else, just for the smell of it. I walk to the corner store every morning and they know my name. There's a boy there who bags my groceries and tells me about his poetry. One afternoon, sat on a bench and watched a girl chase bubbles through the sand. Her grandmother was nearby, reading aloud. They looked at each other like there was real history between them. Didn't hurt. Not like it used to. It just reminded me what love looks like when it's paid attention to. Last week I met someone. Not like that. A woman named Claire who rents the unit next door. She's 68, divorced, and has a scar on her chin from a ladder fall. Talk over tea, I told her about the fireproof box. She told me about the time her son forgot her birthday 3 years in a row. We laughed, in that low kind of way. Then a letter came. From Emily. Handwritten. She said she was sorry if she seemed ungrateful. That it was just a rough day. That she didn't mean anything by it. She asked if we could talk. I folded the letter, placed it inside my Bible. That's where I keep things I can forgive, but not return to. I sent her a postcard with a photo of the ocean, wrote, "Take care of yourself." I'm doing the same, that was all. Sometimes silence is a wall, and sometimes it's a door. I sit here now, in this little room with its humming fridge and sea air creeping through the cracks, and I don't feel erased anymore. I feel written, finally, in my own hand. And this time, I decide who gets to call me anything else. I wasn't always like this, quiet, cautious with what I give. There was a time I'd plan for weeks just to make one Sunday dinner feel like a holiday. Linen napkins, fresh rolls, the good chicken I'd drive an hour out to get. I didn't do it to impress anyone. I did it because I thought love looked like effort. That if I gave enough, remembered every detail. No onions for Thomas. Crustless pie for Emily, then maybe I'd become something they couldn't bear to forget. I was 20 when I married Harold Pierce. We were both still working at the pharmacy counter, he in the back with the prescriptions, me up front with the register and the chewing gum. He had kind eyes, didn't talk much, but when he did, you felt like the only one in the room. We built a life with quiet tools. Steady, work, a mortgage. A swing set Harold put together with crooked nails and pure heart. 3 kids came, one after the other. Thomas was the oldest, serious even as a baby. Then Miriam, delicate as dandelion fluff. And finally Daniel, who arrived smiling and never really stopped. I mothered like it was my job, 'cause it was. Harold worked long shifts, and I filled the gaps. Lunch boxes, permission slips, fevers in the night. I was the one they called for. I never made a scene about it. Just showed up. Every time. When Harold passed, it was a Tuesday. He was reaching for a can of soup, and the world just stopped. He was 59, and I was widowed with a half-paid house and 3 grown children who thought I'd be fine because I always had been. Thomas offered to help with the bills once. I told him no. That's how I was raised. You carry your own weight, even if it breaks your back. So I got a part-time job at the library shelving returns and spent the rest of my time being useful. Babysitting, meal drops. Always the first to arrive at birthdays and the last to leave after scrubbing the plates. Karen came into the picture just after Harold's funeral. She had big eyes and a bigger voice. I thought she was lovely, at first, but she drew invisible lines, one boundary at a time. She didn't like too much involvement, said the kids needed their space, said I should text before dropping by. So I did. Even when I brought over cupcakes, I'd wait outside until someone remembered I was there. I told myself it was just adjustment. that they'd come around. But sometimes the adjusting never stops. It just turns into permission. Emily was born 5 years after Harold died. I held her for the first time in a hospital room full of flowers, and I cried harder than I meant to. She looked so much like Thomas had, same serious eyes, same little fists. She was the last person I ever let myself love without a shield. When she was 4, she called me her favorite person. When she was 7, I taught her how to knit with fingers because Karen didn't like needles lying around. When she was 12, she started correcting how I pronounced things. Stung, but I laughed it off. I always laughed it off. As the years passed, the visits grew fewer. I blamed schedules, school, activities, but sometimes I think they just grew out of me. Like old shoes, useful once, but not worth repairing. Still, I showed up. Every holiday, every recital. I've brought gifts that weren't expensive, but always thoughtful. I knew Emily's favorite colors, her favorite author. The earrings she once said she liked while walking past a window. She never said thank you in a real way. Not in a way that felt like she meant it. But I convinced myself it was just how kids are, that the love was still there, just quieter. I started to notice things. How Thomas only called when something needed fixing. How Karen referred to me as Marjorie instead of Mom. How they never asked me how I was. Not really. I remember one Mother's Day. They posted pictures online, flowers. Brunch, smiles at a vineyard I'd never heard of. I wasn't in any of them. I checked my phone twice, thinking maybe I'd missed a message. I hadn't. That night, I ate a frozen dinner and watched the birds on the wire outside my window. I told myself it was fine, that it was enough to know they were happy. But it wasn't. It felt like watching your own story get rewritten by someone else. And no matter how loud the silence grew, I still answered their calls, still sent cards signed with love, always. Mom. The hardest part wasn't being forgotten. It was realizing that I'd been teaching them how to forget me. Every time. I stayed quiet. Every time I excused the small cuts. Every time I said, it's okay, I understand, no problem. They believed me. Maybe that's why the eye roll hit the way it did. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. Told the truth out loud that I was no longer someone they respected. Just someone they tolerated. And if love becomes something you have to beg for, it's no longer love. So when I sat in my car that night after the pie, with the check still folded in my purse and the sound of their laughter drifting through the closed windows, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just let myself feel it. All of it. Years of showing up. Years of being last. Years of thinking if I just held on a little tighter, they'd remember who I was. But love shouldn't feel like holding your breath. That was the night I exhaled. It wasn't just the eye roll. That was the match. But the fire had been smoldering under the floorboards for a long time. I just hadn't wanted to smell the smoke. The real betrayal came later. Quiet. Like everything else, it started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. I was dropping off a dish, baked ziti, the kind Emily used to ask for when she was younger. They'd invited me over for dinner, but when I arrived, the door was ajar and no one was in the front room. I could hear voices in the kitchen, so I stepped inside. I stopped just before the hallway. Something in me knew. Karen's voice first. Low, sharp. She was saying she expected to be included. You know how she is? Then Thomas. Tired, he said. I know, but the trust isn't even that big. She thinks it's more than it is. I held my breath. Karen again. Then you need to have the talk, Tom. Before the lawyer finalizes anything. You keep letting her think she's in control, but the truth is, she's not. There was a pause. The sound of silverware clinking. Then Karen said she won't need it, not at her age. We'll have to help her understand that. I didn't wait to hear more. I turned, left the dish on the entryway table, and slipped out as quietly as I'd come in. The next day, I went home and pulled out the folder. The one marked Estate Original. Still smelled faintly of Harold's cologne. From the time we'd sat on the porch signing the documents together, his hand firm over mine, reminding me to initial here. And here. And don't forget. The date dot inside was the trust we'd drawn up together. It left portions to all 3 children, but it also named me the executor and gave me full discretion. I'd always assumed they knew that. Apparently they didn't, or they forgot. They hoped I had. I didn't call. I didn't confront. I didn't explain what I'd overheard. Instead, started listening more closely, watching, paying attention to what they didn't say at a brunch 2 weeks later. Karen mentioned a college fund for Emily, how they were setting up a custodial account for the remainder of what Marjorie doesn't use. She laughed when she said it, but I felt the sting behind the smile. I looked at Thomas. He avoided my eyes. It became clear then. They were already dividing what I hadn't finished living through. I was still here, still breathing, still folding laundry and watching the moon and tying up my shoes. But to them, I was a shadow of a woman they used to love, now mostly useful for memory and maybe a down payment. I think the part that hurt the most wasn't the money. I never cared much for it. Harold was the saver, I was the giver. I tucked checks into birthday cards, and over-tipped young waiters don't. What hurt was the quiet plotting, the way they took my softness and mistook it for absence. They'd watched me stay silent for so long. They assumed I had no voice left. But silence isn't the same as surrender. It's just the pause before clarity. That night, I sat with the trust on my lap. I read every word like I was reading a letter from an old friend I'd lost touch with. I saw where Harold had written in the margin. His looping handwriting still so familiar if anything changes. Protect yourself. I underlined that part. I started thinking about all the ways I'd trained them to think I'd always give. Like when Emily crashed her first car and I dipped into my emergency fund without telling anyone. Or when Karen wanted to go back to school and I offered to cover the babysitting. It was love, but it was also erasure. Of me. I went through the family group chat and scrolled. All the photos I'd liked, all the invitations I hadn't received, all the things that confirmed what I already knew. I was present, but not seen. That weekend, I called the lawyer, asked for a private meeting. She said, "Of course, Mrs. Pierce, just bring your paperwork." I remember walking into her office with a folder tucked under my arm like it was armor. I told her I wanted to make some changes. She asked why. I said, because I've spent too many years giving my name and my love and my time to people who only see the parts they can take. She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Let's get started." I changed the executor, updated the beneficiaries, removed Karen's name entirely, narrowed Thomas's share, added to charities, the library, and a small foundation that supports single mothers. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I finally saw myself as someone worth protecting. The last name I added was a young woman named Lacey. She's a nursing student I met at my doctor's office. She held my hand during a blood draw when no one else could come. With me, we'd kept in touch. She sends me cards now, with drawings of ducks and little poems. She asks how I'm doing, even when she doesn't need anything. That's what love looks like. After the meeting, I went home and baked a pie. Apple, the way Emily used to like it. I let it cool on the counter. Then I threw it in the trash, because the girl who used to love that pie, she doesn't see me anymore. And the woman who baked it, she's not baking for ghosts. It was the simplest betrayal, the most dangerous kind. The kind you don't notice until one day you wake up and realize your whole self has been carved away piece by piece, with thank yous and avoidance and assumptions. But I noticed, finally, and I wasn't going to let them write my ending for me. The strangest thing was how calm it felt. Not like a storm breaking, but like the last page of a book closing. I'd always imagined that if I ever left, really left, there'd be crying, screaming, some dramatic flinging of words across the room. But when it finally happened, there was no sound at all, just breath. And the feeling of something deep in me letting go. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in my lap, listening to the hum of the refrigerator from the other room. It had been 3 days since I changed the trust. No one knew yet. No one had asked. Not one phone call, not one check-in. But I didn't need a sign. I already knew what I had to do. I opened my bottom drawer and pulled out the small leather notebook I'd kept since Harold died. It held passwords, reminders, little notes to myself like renew, license, and don't forget Emily's recital at 4. I turned to the last blank page and wrote, "This is the first day I'm not waiting to be remembered." Then I underlined it. There's a strange sort of mourning that comes with a moment like that. You don't cry over the people themselves. You cry over who you thought they were, who you were in their eyes, okay? And who you'll never be to them again. But then, after the grief comes a coolness. Okay, I started walking around the house with a garbage bag, not frantically, methodically, one drawer at a time. The mugs no one used, the sweaters I wore when babysitting. It's a collection of thank you cards from years ago that all said the same thing. I didn't throw everything away. Just the pieces that made me feel small. I found a photo of Thomas holding Emily on the day she was born. I looked at it for a long while. Then I placed it in a manila envelope and wrote on the front, "This was a good day." That's all. I didn't hate them. Still don't. That's not what this is about. It's about choosing peace over longing. Choosing to live in the present instead of sitting by the phone hoping it rings with softness again. That night I made tea. Sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, looking out at the garden Harold had planted. The roses were overgrown, curling onto themselves like they didn't know which way was up anymore. I thought of how much time I'd spent trying to be useful, as if usefulness were the only currency I had left. As if love had to be earned with pies and babysitting. And being the last to leave family dinners. But what if I was allowed to exist without proof? What if I didn't need to be thanked to know I mattered? That question changed everything. I started making lists, quiet ones. What I'd keep, what I'd leave. Where I'd go. Not far. I didn't need far. Just enough distance to stop smelling the same hurt every time I opened the closet. I Googled rentals. Found a small apartment near the coast with white shutters and a view of the ocean if you leaned far enough out the window. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I printed the application, filled it out with slow, careful letters. When it asked for emergency contacts, I wrote, "None yet, but I'm working on it." I didn't tell anyone, not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I didn't want them to talk me out of it. They would have used words like confused, overreacting, dramatic. The same words people use when they don't want to look at their own reflection in someone else's pain. And I wasn't confused. I'd never seen things more clearly. I started gathering what I needed. Deeds, insurance papers, ID cards, assorted. Everything into folders and labeled them. Home, health, bank, freedom. The last one made me smile. I packed slowly. One drawer a day. I didn't rush the goodbye. I wanted to feel each moment. The sound of my shoes on the floor, the light through. The curtains in the late afternoon. The way the house still smelled faintly of Harold when the windows were closed. I opened his closet, ran my fingers over the sleeves of his old suits. I said, "I'm going now. I hope you'd understand," and in the quiet, I think I did, I called. The landlord gave notice. He sounded surprised. I'd lived there for 37 years, I told him. Sometimes even good places become cages. And I meant it. In the days that followed, I felt lighter. Not like I was escaping, more like I was returning. To something I didn't know I'd lost. Myself, maybe. The night before I left, I stood in the kitchen one last time. No lights on. Just the moon washing through the window, silver and soft. I whispered thank you. To the walls, to the floor. To the woman I'd been in that house. Then I locked the door behind me. I didn't cry. I drove through the early dawn. Sun just beginning to bloom behind the trees. I stopped for gas, bought a coffee, smiled at a stranger. It felt like exhaling for the first time in years. And somewhere around mile 40, I realized I hadn't thought about them for a full half hour. Not out of anger, just because I didn't need to anymore. That's when I knew. I hadn't left because they betrayed me. I left because I finally chose me over the version of me they kept shrinking to fit their comfort. And there's power in that quiet but unshakable dot. The kind of power that no one sees coming, not even you. Until you're holding it with both hands and realizing it was yours all along. The motel was nothing special. Blue siding, a chipped sign that read Sea Rest. The air smelled of salt and something older beneath it. Mildew, maybe, or the memory of rain. But the woman at the front desk smiled when I gave her my name. She handed me the key like it meant something. And in that moment, it did. Room 6, end of the row. Small window facing the highway. I didn't unpack right away. I just sat on the edge of the bed and listened. The room was quiet in a way my old life never was. Not filled. With clocks ticking or someone else's television in the other room. Just silence. Real, clean silence. I took out the notebook, turned to a fresh page, wrote the date at the top, and underlined it. Then I wrote, I am still here. That night, I made a list. Not the kind I used to keep groceries, birthdays, things. I needed to remember for other people. This one was just for me. Things I now own, my time, my voice, my passai stopped there. 3 felt right. I left the house exactly as I intended. Nothing dramatic. I locked every door. Left behind the baking dishes, the embroidered pillows Karen had once called too busy, and the guest towels no one ever touched. I left the pie plate in the sink. It's not dirty, just resting. On the kitchen table, I placed a single sheet of paper. Please forward any mail to the address below. No visitors, no questions. Then I signed it with my full name, the one I used before. Everyone started calling me Mom and nothing else. The car was packed with only what mattered. A suitcase, the trust documents. A shoebox of letters Harold had written me over the years, the kind that start with just thinking of you and end with love always. HI didn't bring the family albums. I didn't need to see their faces right now. There's a kind of peace that comes with moving through the world unannounced. No one knows where I am. No one watching me out of the corner of their eye waiting to see if I'll forgive or come. Crawling back, they wouldn't even notice I was gone. Not at first. The first few days in the motel, I kept expecting something. A call? A message. Even just a passive little text from Thomas. You okay, Mom? But nothing came. And that silence didn't hurt. Not like before. It was just confirmation. I opened the fireproof box and took stock again. Everything was still there. Updated, notarized, clean. The new trust was printed on thick paper, signed in fresh ink. My lawyer had looked at me with that same tilted head when I made the changes. Are you sure you want to go this far, Mrs. Pierce? And I said, I'm not going far at all. Just going where I matter. The next morning, I went to the post office and opened a P.O. box. It felt like claiming a corner of the world. The key was warm in my palm when they handed it over. I filled out a change of address form. Wrote every letter of my name slowly. Not because I needed to, but because I could dot at the bank. I adjusted the accounts. Took Karen's name off the emergency contact list. Added a note to my file. Do not release information to family members. Without written permission, the woman at the desk didn't ask why. She just said, of course, Ms. Pierce. I liked how that sounded after. I bought a notebook from a small shop on the boardwalk. Thick paper, no lines. The woman behind the counter wrapped it like a gift even though I didn't ask. When I got back to the motel, sat on the bed, unwrapped it slowly, and wrote on the first page, this is my witness. This time, I write everything down. I started. With the little things, how the motel towels always smelled faintly of bleach, how the birds outside the window pecked the gravel like they knew secrets. How I didn't miss being called. I began planning for something else. Not revenge. Just clarity. I requested copies of old receipts, things I'd paid for that no one remembered. Emily's car repair. the summer camp. The deposit on their first apartment. Not because I wanted reimbursement. I just wanted a record. Proof that I'd been there. That I hadn't imagined all that giving. I printed them out one by one and filed them under a new folder. History. That's the thing about being erased. Sometimes you need to build your own evidence. I changed my phone number on the 4th day. Not out of anger, just necessity. I didn't want to be reachable. I wanted to be findable, but only by people who truly looked, and I knew none of them would. Not right away. The next Sunday would come and go. They'd gather around some table, maybe open a group chat, wondering why I hadn't shown up. Karen would say she's probably just being sensitive. Thomas would shrug, and I would be here, watching the sky darken over the sea from my motel window, drinking tea with a spoon of honey, and writing myself back into the world. I didn't need permission anymore. I didn't need to be useful. I just needed to be free. And I was. It took them 6 days. The first sign was a voicemail. From Thomas. His voice was tight, rehearsed, the way it always got when he didn't know how to say what he needed to say. Hey, Mom, just checking in. Emily said you weren't at home. She tried to drop off something and, well, we're wondering if everything's all right. Give me a call when you get this. I didn't sing quotes 2 hours later. Sharper, less concern. More accusations slipped under the surface like a knife tucked in a purse. We've been trying to reach you. It's not like you two just disappear. If this is about Christmas, I think you're taking it a little far. Let's talk like adults. I turned off the sound on my phone. That evening, I sat on the motel balcony, with a blanket over my knees, watching a seagull fight the wind. I sipped my tea and thought, so now I've missed. The next day brought texts. 3 from Thomas, 1 from Emily. Mom, please just tell me you're okay. We're starting to worry. Karen says you took something from the house. Did you? I didn't answer. Then, Emily, did I do something wrong? I stared at that one the longest. She was the only one who didn't ask about the trust. Not yet, not directly. But the message wasn't really about me. It was about discomfort. Hers, not mine. I powered the phone down and left it that way too. More days passed. I read novels from the library and walked along the coast each morning. There was a woman who sold honey from the back of her truck in the parking lot. I bought a jar and spooned it straight from the lid like candy. The quiet started filling me in places I hadn't realized were hollow. On the 8th day, I stopped by the front desk to pick up mail. There was a stack of envelopes waiting. One caught my eye, thick cream paper, embossed return address. My lawyer. I opened it in the room with my hands steady and slow. Inside was a copy of the certified trust update and a brief note. Please keep this for your records. All documents are active and final. As discussed, you retain full control. I slid the papers into my folder labeled Freedom. A few hours later, the phone buzzed again. I'd forgotten to keep it off. I glanced down, 14 missed calls, 1 voicemail from Thomas marked urgent. Mom, I need to understand what's going on. I just talked to the lawyer. They said you removed Karen, that you changed your executor. What is this? Didn't even tell us? The message cut off. Another voicemail followed immediately. You know this is going to cause problems. Serious problems. It's going to be tension in the family. People are going to be hurt. I stood by the window and let the words wash over me like background noise. For years, I'd swallowed that same logic. Don't upset things. Don't create tension. Be quiet. Be helpful. Be gone. But now, finally, I understood. Peace isn't avoiding conflict. Peace is choosing yourself when no one else will. That afternoon, Kieran sent an email. Formal, cold, subject line. Re-estate matters body, Marjorie. We've been made aware of recent changes to the estate plan. While we respect your autonomy, we feel blindsided and disappointed. If there's any chance to revisit this decision with a family present, we'd like to set a time. I didn't write back. They weren't trying to understand. They were trying to manage. The panic was less about me than what I represented, control slipping through their fingers. Legacy rearranged, an old woman refusing to be predictable. By the end of the week, Emily posted something on social media. A photo of a pie oddly familiar. Captioned, "Some people disappear when they stop being useful." "Guess we learned to bake our own desserts," friends commented. Sending her hearts and hugs and messages like you deserve better. I didn't comment. I didn't cry. I just made a note in my notebook. Let them tell their version. I'll live mine. A neighbor from my old street called and left a message too. Said she saw the moving van and wondered what was going on. That Karen had told her I was taking a little break to sort some things out. I laughed at that one. It was the first time I'd laughed in weeks. That night, the motel's old heater rattled in the corner. I lay in bed and listened to the rain against the glass. Thought about how quickly absence becomes a problem for people. Oop, never noticed your presence. They hadn't called when I was home alone on holidays. They hadn't asked how I was when I had bronchitis and drove. It's myself to urgent care. But now that I had reclaimed what was mine, they were panicking. That wasn't love. That was fear of losing what they thought they were owed. I wrote a letter. Not to send, just to say what needed saying. To Thomas, you weren't a bad son. You were just careless with the parts of me that couldn't be seen. I gave freely, and you thought it was endless. It WASN single quotes to Karen. I was never trying to control anything. I just wanted to matter. All dot to Emily. I loved you more than I loved my own reflection. But you looked through me, and that made all the difference. I folded the pages, placed them in my notebook. I would decide later whether they needed to be burned, mailed, or simply. Remembered by the 10th day, the phone had stopped ringing. No more messages. No more threats masked as concern. Just silence. And in that silence, I slept deeply like someone who'd finally locked the door from the inside. I moved into the apartment on a Monday. Late afternoon. The sun was low but strong, slanting through the front window and warming the empty wooden floor. There were no welcome balloons, no casseroles in the fridge, no one waiting to hug me at the door, just keys in my hand and the sound of my own footsteps as I walked from room to room. It was small. One bedroom, one bath, kitchen with a crooked cabinet door. But the ocean was a 10-minute walk if I moved slow, and when I opened the window, the breeze smelled clean, like newness, like I might still have something left to grow into. The first night, I didn't unpack. I made tea, sat on the floor with my back against the wall, and watched the light fade when it got too dark to see. I whispered, "You're home." Now, it felt true. The next morning, I bought bread and fruit from a corner store 2 blocks down. The cashier was a young man with a crooked name tag and a habit of humming between customers. He asked if I wanted a rewards card. I said no, but thank you. He smiled like I'd said something kind. That was the beginning. I started going to the library again. Not to work, just to sit in the quiet. I read mysteries and biographies, books about women who'd left something behind and built something else with bare hands. I read slowly, took notes in the margins, even though they weren't mine to keep. There's a woman who sits across from me some mornings, Claire, mid-60s, white hair in a braid. Down her back and orthopedic shoes, she doesn't apologize. 4. We started nodding at each other. Then one day, I asked her if she liked the book she was reading. She said no, but she was going to finish it anyway, just to prove she could. That's how we became friends. We don't talk much about the past. We sit at the same bench by the boardwalk sometimes and split a bag of popcorn while the seagulls circle. She told me once that her son hasn't spoken to her in 8 years. Said it like she was describing the weather. I didn't ask why. She didn't ask about my story either. Some women recognize the shape of silence in each other. On Thursdays, I go to a little cafe near the bookstore. The waitress, Mira, always puts honey in my tea without asking. She remembers things that I like, the seat near the window, that I read with one finger resting on the page like a bookmark. Once, she sat with me on her break and said, "You look like someone who used to be very important to a lot of people." I smiled and said, I think I still am. Just not to the same people. She nodded like she understood. I've started writing again. Nothing grand. Just short notes. Letters I'll never send. Stories I tell myself at night before sleep. I write about a woman who disappeared and was never found, not because she was lost, but because she finally went where no one could reach her with expectations. Some days I still check my phone, but not to see if Thomas called or if Emily sent a text. I check the weather, I check the tides, I check how many steps I've walked. They haven't tried again, not in any real way. Karen posted something about me on her Facebook. Someone sent me a screenshot. It's a vague quote about boundaries and toxic people. I didn't respond. I didn't even flinch, because it's not mine anymore. It's that version of me, the woman they built out of guilt and silence and convenience. She's gone now. I wear soft clothes and eat when I'm hungry and talk to myself out loud without shame. I say, "Good job today," when I finish a walk. "You're doing just fine." When I wash the dishes before bed, I've met a girl named Donnie who lives upstairs, 23, covered in paint. Splatters, always rushing somewhere. But she stops when she sees me, calls me Miss Marjorie, and tells me about her cat. Last week, she knocked on my door just to ask if I'd tried mango popsicles. I hadn't. She brought me two. That night, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because someone had thought of me in a small, bright way. It was the kind of kindness that doesn't ask anything back. And that's what this life is now. Quiet, honest kindness, without strings. I'm not important to the people I thought I would be, but I'm still here, still capable of laughing at bad movies, still able to memorize poems, still learning the names of flowers I used to walk past without noticing. I have a calendar now where I mark small things. First full night of sleep. It's first time I danced alone in the kitchen. It's first time I said, "I don't miss them." Ben meant it. There's power in small things. There's power in building a life so gentle. Doesn't bruise you just to walk through. It dot. And for the first time in a long, long while, I don't feel like I'm waiting to be rescued or forgiven or understood. I am the thing I've been waiting for, and I showed up. It happened on a Sunday. I was coming back from the cafe, tea in hand, a bag of oranges slung over one wrist, when I saw the car parked outside my apartment building. Silver, clean, with a slight dent on the back bumper I recognized immediately. Thomas's car. I stood there for a while, watching the sun reflect off the hood. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just felt still, like a page waiting to be turned. He was sitting on the steps, back bent, elbows on his knees, staring down at the ground like he didn't quite know what to do with it. When he looked up and saw me, he stood too fast. Like he'd practiced this moment but still got it wrong. "Hey," he said softly, like a boy again. "Hi," I replied. I didn't invite him up. I didn't walk closer. I just stood there in the shade of the small tree out front, letting the wind carry what it wanted. I wasn't angry. I wasn't warm either. It was something else. A kind of clean emptiness that felt more honest than love ever had. He cleared his throat. "I didn't know where else to find you." I nodded. I didn't help him fill the silence. He tried again. "Emily's worried, Karen." "Well, you know how she is." That was the first untrue thing. He was the one who was worried. "She said you left, and then we found out about the trust. I guess I didn't realize how far it had all gone. Gone. Like I was a distance. A detour." I said nothing. He shifted his weight, eyes scanning the gravel. "I didn't mean for you to feel like you weren't part of things. We've been busy." "Life's been." That was the second lie. I let him finish the sentence in his own silence. "You could have just said something," he finally offered, and there it was, the familiar twist. The suggestion that I had made it harder than it needed to be. I held his gaze. "I did," I said. "Over and over. You just didn't hear it until something was missing." He swallowed hard. "I guess I thought you'd always be there." That part was true. He took a small step closer. "Emily misses you. She asks about you every day." I didn't ask if that was true. I didn't need to know. I'm not here to argue, he added quickly. Just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For all of it, his voice cracked just enough to make me believe it cost him something to say that. And for a moment, I remembered him as a boy, running down the driveway with skinned knees and fists full of wildflowers, crying when he lost his mittens, holding his baby sister's hand while she slept in the car. I felt a small ache in my chest, not regret, not longing, just the echo of what once was. I took a slow breath. I don't hate you, Thomas. Never did. Then I looked at him closely. Let him feel the full weight of my voice. But I'm not coming back. He opened his mouth like he might protest, but he saw something in my eyes and closed it again. I gestured toward the apartment door. I like my life here. It's not big, but it's mine. I'm not waiting to be asked how I am. I don't have to make pies to feel useful and go to sleep, knowing I was enough that day. His face fell not in anger, but in something closer to mourning. You could visit, he said, almost like a question. You could write, if you want, I replied. That was the closest thing to forgiveness I could offer. He nodded slowly, reached into his pocket and pulled out something, folded a photo. He held it toward me. I didn't move to take it. It's from her birthday last year, he said. You weren't there, but she kept asking if we could save a seat for you. I finally stepped forward, took it between my fingers. It was Emily smiling into a slice of cake. Her eyes had changed, a little older, a little more unsure. Tell her. I'm okay, I said. Tell her she doesn't owe me anything. But if she wants to find me, she can start by listening. He looked like he wanted to cry, but he didn't. I turned the photo over, wrote a number on the back, a new one, the one only a few people had. For Emily, I said, not Karen, not group chats, just her. He nodded again. I understand. He started to say something else, but I shook my head gently. This is where I leave it, I said. He turned to go, walked slowly back to the car like he wasn't sure how to carry what had just happened. I stood on the steps, watching until the taillights disappeared. Then I went inside, poured myself. T-Dot sat by the window and breathed. It wasn't closure in the way people write about it. No hugs, no tears, no big reunion. It was something smaller, cleaner. The past had knocked. I had answered, but I hadn't stepped outside, and that made all the difference. The seashell sits on the windowsill now, pale pink, cracked on one side. I found it the morning after Thomas left, half buried in sand, curled like a sleeping ear. I picked it up, brushed it off, and whispered into it. I'm still here. That shell has stayed with me ever since. Not for decoration, not as a trophy, just as a reminder that there are pieces of beauty waiting in silence, that not everything broken needs to be repaired. Some things just need to be held. Life has become small in the best way. I wake when the light reaches my toes. No alarms, no rush. I pour 1 cup of coffee, not 2, and I drink it slowly. Mornings, I hum a little tune I don't remember learning. Some mornings, I don't say a word until noon. And that's okay. I've made a ritual of writing 1 sentence a day. No more, no less. Sometimes it's something I notice. The way the woman at the bakery laughs when she drops a spoon. Sometimes it's just how I feel. Today I wrote, I feel like water finding its shape again. Claire and I still meet once a week. She brings scones now. I bring the thermos. We don't say much, but there's comfort in her nearness. The kind of company that doesn't need performance. She told me last week that she started painting again. I said, you were always a painter. Coo just stopped remembering. She smiled. And you were always someone brave. It caught me off guard, hearing it aloud. Because bravery for most of my life looked like holding everything together. Keeping birthdays remembered, floors clean, meals hot. Swallowing disappointment before. It turned sharp, but now I know. Bravery is also letting go of the version of yourself that made everyone else comfortable. I think about Harold sometimes. Not with sadness, just with softness. I think he'd be proud of me, not for being alone, but for being honest, for not folding myself into someone else's shape just because I was scared of the quiet. He used to say, peace isn't what you feel when things are easy, it's what you choose when things are hard. I write that on the inside of every notebook now. Emily hasn't called. Not yet, but last week a letter came. Small envelope. Careful handwriting. It's just one page. She wrote, Grandma, I found your number on the back of the photo. I don't know what to say except I'm sorry. I miss you. I didn't realize how quiet the house was until you were gone. I've been baking. It's not the same. I hope you're safe. Love 'em. I read it twice, then folded it and slipped it. Under the seashell, I haven't written back. Not because I won't, just because I want to do it when the words are ready, not when I feel pressured, or guilty, or owed. That's something this new life has taught me. There is no hurry in healing. No deadline on deciding what peace looks like. For me, it's in the details now. A fresh bar of soap, clean sheets that smell like lemon, the tiny sound the lamp makes when I click it off at night. I used to live for their approval, their attention. I live for quiet dinners where I eat what I want and no one comments. On the salt, they still don't understand. That's all right. They don't have to. Let them keep telling their version of me, the one who abandoned, who overreacted, who left too suddenly. I don't own their stories. I only own mine. And mine is this. A woman gave and gave and gave, and gave until there was nothing left but habit. Then one day, she heard her own voice whisper, enough. And instead of ignoring it, she listened. I'm not waiting anymore. Not for invitations. Not for apologies. Not for a place at someone else's table. I built my own. It's small, wobbly. Some days it creaks when I sit down, but it holds what I need. Bread, tea, a notebook. My own name, spoken aloud without flinching. Sometimes I think about the trust, the signatures, the changes, the storm it stirred. I don't regret a word of it. Not because it hurt them, but because it saved me. My name is Marjorie Pierce. I am 73 years old. I have lived a life that bent in places. It shouldn't have. But I'm still standing. Still singing softly to myself in the mornings. Still finding seashells cracked and lovely. Still learning that solitude isn't the same as loneliness. This morning, I lit a candle and whispered, thank you for not forgetting me. Not to the world. Not to anyone else, to myself, because the truth is, I thought I was gone too. But I'm here. I came back. I stayed. And this time I decide who gets to call me anything else.